All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. We're back. I didn't upload the last few days. I apologize. I was kind of busy doing a bunch of other stuff, but we're back. I meant to do not only, our updated tier list this week on Tuesday, which again, I didn't upload Tuesday, and then Wednesday, typically I do my midweek, off meta report / deck highlight. I don't know what we call it. It's like Wacky Wednesday. Both of those days we missed. So the way I look at it, tomorrow I got to do my updated best decks for ranked. Today's Thursday. I didn't really have enough time to do the tier list, so I'll probably move the updated kind of ranked tier list to next week, and then that way maybe, we'll have that available for the last week of ranked, I suppose. But today, this is going to be that midweek showcase. Lots of other online tournaments going on over the last few days, and we're going to talk about some of the coolest decks that aren't necessarily considered meta decks, but have done well at those online tournaments. That being said, you should definitely go register for PMPT number 36, Dynamic Drive. $100 prize pool. It is this Saturday, June 20th. But if you do, for whatever the reason, if you can't make this tournament this weekend, we will have another tournament a week from this Saturday, and that's going to be the last tournament of this B3A season. That being said, they also just announced a teaser for B4 coming at the end of July. This might be kind of confusing, but Mega Rayquaza it was teased. So that is going to be, I forget the name of the set. They didn't show anything other than that Mega Rayquaza is coming, and they didn't actually show the full card. But that should be the set for B4. And then, hopefully we get some mini sets and stuff after that. But that being said, that's going to come out at the end of July. So they've yet to announce the set that's going to be coming out at the end of June, because there is a set, ready to be released, or should be releasing in about, I don't know, I think about like 11 or 12 days. So next week, we should be getting a teaser for the next mini set, which is going to be B3B. It's all a bit confusing. They did this last year, sort of, when they announced the B series. They showed us the Mega Pokemon, and then there was 3 sets in between. It was kind of confusing, but anyway, I figured I would just mention that. There's nothing really to showcase. There's probably a slight teaser. What is cool is that there's going to be an official TCG set as well. That's kind of releasing later on, but coincides with this Pokemon Pocket set. But it's Generation 3, and I think that B4 will likely be Generation 3 themed, being Hoenn, right? Yeah, the Hoenn region, which I'm excited about, because I think a lot of people have wanted Hoenn, related sets in Pokemon Pocket for a long time. So whenever we get that new information, it'll be here on the channel. I've been busy this week, but from here on out and into next week, I should be definitely more available. So, just stick around. Basically, this is a long intro. We got to get into the deck lists from this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, by the way. Super close to 50,000 subscribers, which is super cool, and I'm really, really excited about that. But let's dive right into it. Shout out to all of the players and all of the tournaments that we highlight in today's video. Link to register for PMPT 36 down in the description below. All right, shout out to the 3-minute intro, guys. Let's do it. So at the Nuggies Pog tournament number 11 is going to be Shazan 97 from Great Britain, who was playing Mega Audino, which I think is a new Mega Pokemon that when it released, I don't really think many Pokemon felt, or many players felt like this Pokemon was going to be, necessarily super good, but it's not a terrible Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination. Let's take a look at the deck list here again. 6-2 at this tournament. Ended up losing to Zoroark and then a Greninja Blaziken, but beat some really strong meta decks throughout this tournament. Beat Hydreigon, beat Suicune, beat Blaziken, and beat Lucario, which are all impressive wins, by the way. So a really good run. Let's take a look here at this Mega Audino deck. And one of the things that stands out to me is Shaman. I think a lot of people forget about this Shaman card. This is the Fragrant Flower Garden Shaman, which used to see a lot more play, back in the day. I understand why people don't play this anymore, because the ability is effectively the same as Watch Over, but it's kind of better in some ways, kind of worse in some ways, right? Like Shaman is a low HP Pokemon, but it's a non-EX Pokemon. However, Fragrant Flower Garden, this card used to see a ton of play. It just really hasn't for a long time. Once during your turn, you may heal 10 damage from each of your Pokemon. So that's actually pretty relevant, especially when you consider that Mega Audino's attack heals 30 damage from each of your Pokemon. So I think the concept here, utilizing Mega Audino and Indeedee, is to basically, whatever every single turn, you're going to be healing for a total of 40 damage across all of your Pokemon with Audino and then Shaman. Mega Audino has 180 HP, but it is a basic, so Giant Cape starting planes is going to bring you up to 220. We also have double Pokemon Center Ladies in here for the extra healing, but also the status condition healing, and then Lucky Ice Pop thrown in. And then the Indeedee's on the bench. So like the way I look at this deck is like, sure, as long as you're not maybe going up against something that, significantly relies on being able to snipe the bench, because that's certainly going to be a big issue. But starting planes does help with that as well. Like I really like starting planes in any deck that plays Indeedee because it brings Indeedee up to 150. So things like Shampoo, can't snipe the bench. These sort of sustain strategies are certainly somewhat relevant. What I find interesting here is that we're not playing the Bramble-Gast kind of combo, which came out alongside Audino. And the way that people played Audino, at least originally, was you set up the Bramble-Gasts on the bench. They took damage from Audino and then moved them to your bench Bramble-Gasts, and then Audino healed all of them. So you kind of spread the damage out and then healed kind of the spread effect damage healing with Audino's attack. And it was a really cool combo. This deck plays one Mantike as well as one Shaman. So it's a weird deck. I do understand that you can just sort of turbo, accelerate those energies with Mantike onto Mega Audino. At the same time, you're going to be playing Psychic Energies in this deck anyway, so you can attack with Indeedee. And of course, I guess all of these Pokemon, Indeedee and Shaman, have a retreat cost of 1, but we're not playing X speed or anything like that, so you're going to find yourself in a position to where you have to attach and then retreat. If you go second, probably not a big deal because you could just retreat maybe into the Mantike. This deck at first glance seems like it would have some consistency problems, at least sort of, like most decks playing Mantike really, in any, baby Pokemon that generates energy, you kind of want to have that immediately, and having only one basic Pokemon in your deck be a Mantike seems a little bit strange. Like, how often are you actually leading off with Mantike? But I guess as long as you just get Audino in the active spot, it's probably pretty fine. This thing only does 90 damage and the healing is fine, but once Audino goes down, the game is over. So against any objectively strong deck that is going to be able to hit for probably more than like 120 damage turn after turn, eventually you're just going to get KO'd, you know what I mean? So in fact, losing to Zoroark is certainly very interesting as well. Double Cyrus in this deck with a Sabrina. So this is an interesting list. I really don't think Mega Audino is that bad. I just think there's probably like better options. And as far as like sustained decks go, I do think Mega Steelix is probably like the #1 example of that. Traditionally speaking, in Pokemon Pocket, it's better to just reduce the damage taken instead of like just heal the damage, right? Because effectively at the end of all of it, it buys you an additional turn, right? Like it doesn't matter if you can heal for 60 damage if you only have 100 HP left and your opponent's gonna hit you for 100, right? Because then the game's over and you get KO'd. Whereas damage reduction happens on your opponent's turn when they attack you, so theoretically you get more value out of damage reduction. And we see that, right, with things like Mega Steelix. But yeah, Mega Audino, I thought this was a cool deck, so I wanted to highlight it. Shout out to Shazan 97. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. But next up at the Breakfast Club, Kelp Classic number 15 is Colonial 10 from Mexico, who was playing Mega Crobat. And I really think Mega Crobat is one of those Pokemon that just sort of fell out of contention after Zoroark came out, right? You guys remember like the alternative to Hydreigon Dark type decks was Crobat for at least a few seasons, and it actually was a very substantially strong deck. It was very respectable. It had similar high roll potential as Hydreigon. However, Crobat with the 1 energy attack cost meant once you did get Crobat in the active, you could commit energies elsewhere. And it was actually a really, really strong Pokemon. And it fit pretty well with the Poison Barb Nihilego stuff, right? Which Hydreigon was playing at one point or another. And honestly, I think after Zoroark came out and there was a better, or I guess newer alternative to Hydreigon in those Dark type decks, Crobat just stopped seeing play. Crobat came in a long time ago. I forget which set. Was it A3? Might have been. It was a while ago. In fact, I remember when Crobat released, I was like, this card is not bad at all. And then nobody really played it. And then Hydreigon came out, and for some reason, it ended up being pretty decent all along. But I guess nobody really played it. But yeah, 1 Mega Absol in here. We do have the Bombardier to give Absol and Nihilego free retreat. I always forget that Nihilego has a retreat cost of 1, which does work very well with Bombardier. It makes you kind of wonder why people don't still play Poison Barb Nihilego in Hydreigon. It probably might be better. It's more overall damage, but people in Hydreigon play Rocky Helmet now. And yeah, Zoroark doesn't play Nihilego. So if you were to play a poison type based dark deck, Crobat kind of is, the way to do that. Not only does Poison Barb, of course, activate if you get attacked, which is really relevant, but Crobat does 70 and poison for 1 energy. So, you can kind of press the issue and then poison your opponent with your attack. I mean, the damage really does add up. I think that Crobat's a very respectable Pokemon. Keep in mind, you do have 170 HP, which, is a decent amount. It's actually the same as Mega Absol, which is funny. And again, just like Zoroark, Crobat is a 2-prize Pokemon. The only thing here is, like, in the metagame now, there are Pokemon that are going to be able to 1-hit KO Crobat. Lucario can certainly do it. So, Miraidon is another one that could definitely get that reach out there. So, I do like Crobat. Again, there's just so many good Dark-type Pokemon in the metagame now. I don't really, this is just a one-of example. I thought it was fun to see somebody play Crobat and do well, because I think Crobat's totally fine. Like, it's definitely, like, I say it, I've been saying it for the last, like, 3 weeks. We have so many strong decks in Pokemon Pocket. And, you know, there's only so many types. And what we see is that if, like, a new strategy or a new deck comes out for a particular type, people tend to favor whatever's newer, you know? There's some exceptions to that. But, you know, we've seen that time and time again, to be fair, and I think that's kind of what happened with Zoroark, you know? I would say there's like 3 really strong Dark-type decks you could build around. Not only are we incorporating things like Darkrai and Mega Absol into all of this, but you have Zoroark, Hydreigon, and now Crobat. All of those are very, very strong options. So, you know, shout out to Crobat. Shout out to this player, too. Shout out to Colonial at the Breakfast Club playing good old Crobat EX. One of my favorite cards in the game. I like low energy attack cost Pokemon. Next up is going to be Dash MD at the Breakfast Club, Kelp Classic once again. This is going to be a Mega Altaria deck, but this is like the Sylveon Evolution version, which, you know, isn't really that different. At the end of the day, this is, I think, just still Sleep Altaria, but it's played just a little bit differently. So, you know, we do have 3 Eevees in the deck, only 1 Swablu, 1 Mega Altaria. So the deck is more so about being a Psychic type Evolution deck than it really is an Altaria deck, but that's, again, one of the biggest upsides to Altaria is that it's just really easy to get it going and to get it set up. We're still playing 1 Lissy in the deck, and I think that makes sense because Boosted Evolution Eevee has 50 HP. Why? Why does it have 50 HP? Why is it searchable with Lyssia? Why can we evolve into a single energy attack cost Espeon on our first turn? Who knows? I don't know. I really don't. The only thing I don't love about Evolution decks here is that, like, if you are building a deck focused around Eevee, you end up playing at least 1 Eevee EX. Now, Boosted Evolution's the better option, but Eevee EX is a big liability, especially if you do the lead off with it. And when you take a look at the basic Pokemon in our deck, we have 1 Igglybuff, 1 Swablu, double boosted Evolution Eevee, and then 1 Eevee EX, right? So the cards you would want to lead off with would be like Igglybuff or boosted Evolution Eevee. But sometimes you are, you know, going to be leading that 1 Swablu and that 1 Eevee EX. And it's only 90 HP. It's worth 2 prizes, so it's a little bit scary. But I believe this player here kind of decided to play the extra Eevee and then play Sylveon for the extra draw support, which, to be fair, I think Sylveon is also a very powerful Pokemon with its ability. Another card that people just don't play, you know, for maybe for good reason. I don't really think Sylveon is that crazy. Like, as soon as we got Copycat into the game with the B series, it really felt like any deck had that extra draw support and you didn't have to play an entire Pokemon line to do it. There was a time where Sylveon EX was super dominant. The last card here is going to be the training area, which makes sense because all of our attackers here are stage 1 Pokemon. But yeah, I mean, it's effectively just a variant of Sleep Altaria, one that I think is a little bit funner, a little bit cooler, right? There's more things going on, and that probably makes it less consistent overall. But, you know, theoretically speaking, the Sylveon EX should help with that. You know, it's just an extra Professor's Research if you do end up drawing into Sylveon, and you can technically play it on the same turn that you play Copycat in Research, right? So your single turn extension capability is a bit farther. That was always one of the benefits of Sylveon that we just don't really see. Games now, especially with Mega Pokemon and the way that a lot of games are kind of built, a way that a lot of decks are built is like turn 3 is kind of fine. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's really super stressed to kind of get up and running on that second turn. We used to see that a bit more often, and Sylveon allowed you to do that, right? Because you could, like, draw 2 with Research. This was before Copycat came out. And then you could draw 2 more with Sylveon. And if you had a second Sylveon, then, you know, God forbid you drew 6 cards in one turn. At the time, it really was crazy. And honestly, like, I know Copycat's really strong. This deck plays Copycat still. It still plays a Copycat. In fact, we're playing Lyssia, Pokeball, Copycat, Research, and Sylveon. So, like, half of our deck is just meant to, you know, pull cards out of our deck and draw. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally fine deck, for sure. It's definitely not bad. I forgot to mention, but there's a double Darkrai in here. And that's the problem with Darkrai, is that you could just lead with it. You know, it is pretty often that you do just get stuck with Darkrai in the active spot, which is never super ideal. We are playing 1 X speed though, so, you know, maybe it's fine. I just wanted to highlight this because I thought Sylveon was somewhat interesting, you know what? So shout out to Dash MD, a great player, one that we see all of the time. We definitely highlighted him many, many times on the channel. But next up is going to be Ash 007 at the Breakfast Club Cult Classic once again. And this is going to be Greninja Mimikyu. And, you know, it's so funny because Mimikyu, to me, is honestly one of the better Pokemon in all of Pokemon Pocket. And I just don't think people really play it enough. I understand maybe why. I get it's a Psychic type Pokemon. We have a ton of strong Psychic type Pokemon. The value that you get from something like an Indeedee EX oftentimes is just better than Mimikyu, and it doesn't need to be in the active spot. And even if Indeedee does come into the active spot, theoretically, it's likely going to be dealing a lot more damage than Mimikyu would, right? So the niche thing with Mimikyu is, of course, that the disguise ability means that you're living an attack regardless. It doesn't matter. And to be fair, it also is protected from like a bench snipe, right? So Chien-Pao can't just snipe a Mimikyu on the bench. It has to do it twice, theoretically, to take the KO. Mimikyu is a really good Pokemon, and what it does is it guarantees that you're going to get 2 attacks off, which does add up to 140 damage, and theoretically, you know, it also buys you an additional turn. And I think that Mimikyu has always been very valuable with Greninja because you're basically guaranteeing that you're going to get an additional turn because of Mimikyu's disguise ability, which therefore means you're going to get an additional turn to use your Water Shurikens or draw into your Cyrus as a win condition. So I always really liked Greninja in Mimikyu, but the thing about this deck list always is that it just felt like there might be better ways to play this, right? When Mimikyu came out and people were playing it with Greninja, also Altaria, Mega Altaria and Greninja was seeing play. And it kind of just comes back to what I was saying before, is that there's so many strong cards, but there's only so many types in the game. And every type definitely has like a flagship Pokemon. And I think that for Psychic type, it really is, it is Altaria. Now, Mimikyu has a different weakness than Altaria, but it only has 120 HP. So the weakness doesn't really matter, right? If Mimikyu was also a Mega Pokemon, where it was consistently living, because of its ability and the fact that it has 120 HP, the weakness does not matter. The weakness has never really mattered with Mimikyu. You're going to guarantee you live one hit, and then you're probably guaranteed to get KO'd on the next turn. So the weakness stuff and the differences between Mimikyu and Altaria doesn't really matter. And it really just comes down to the fact that, like, well, do I just want to survive 2 turns and hit for 140, or just hit for 130 in 1 turn with Altaria and also guarantee to live 2 turns? You know what I mean? Because you have 190 HP. So it's definitely niche, and now it's a basic and not a stage 1 Pokemon, but also you can incorporate it very well with sleep. So in most scenarios, Altaria is kind of better. That's just my tangent here. What I like about this deck is that, we're playing Chingling and we're playing Comfey and we're playing Indeedee, so we're filling that space in only 1 Mimikyu. So instead of playing like just double Mimikyu and then maybe double Chingling, we're not committed fully to the 2-2 Swablu Altaria lineup like you would be for Altaria Greninja, right? So there's extra space in the deck is what I'm saying. And that does leave up some room to play things like a Chingling, a Comfey, and an Indeedee. So that's what I do like about this deck list, is that you're utilizing that extra deck space because you're only running 1 Mimikyu instead of, double Altaria. We have 3 extra Pokemon spots, and we're using them for very useful Pokemon that in general are going to be valuable. The thing about Chingling as a lead is that, our attacking Pokemon are 2 prize Pokemon, so the prize math doesn't feel great there in general. Comfey is definitely going to provide value on the bench, so I like the Comfey added in. And like I said, Indeedee can take big KOs. Indeedee's actually really nice into Koraidon, right? So when you have Indeedee, you can kind of pressure your opponent to say, sure, you can bring in your Koraidon, but I'm just going to one-hit KO it with Indeedee, which is pretty cool. This is a deck that probably could benefit from a starting planes as well, but probably benefits more from a peculiar plaza. So I like the deck, and I like Mimikyu. I wanted to highlight it. Shout out to Ash 007. 6-3 record here. Lost to Sleep Altaria, lost to Zoroark, and also lost to Sleep Altaria, but did beat 1 Sleep Altaria and beat a Gourgeist Altaria as well. So definitely a really good run, shout out to Ash 007. I do like the deck. I like Mimikyu a lot. But next up here is going to be TBC J Phenomenal from Poland here at the Nuggy Pog tournament number 11. This is going to be Ceruledge EX. Now, this, I believe, was a promo. Yeah, this is a promo that came out and alongside Charcadet, the Protect promo Charcadet, which is interesting. But Ceruledge is a Pokemon. It's just one of these promos, right? Like, I like that they release EX cards as promos in Pokemon Pocket. It is somewhat refreshing. Some of them are somewhat unique, but they're never that good. That's the reality of it, is that promos just are never great. Now, Ceruledge here has 150 HP. It is weak to Dark, retreat cost of 2, stage 1 Pokemon, and it does 80 damage. And you discard a random energy among both players, amongst all of the attached energies from all Pokemon. And it's basically, if you remember Mega Swampert EX, so Mega Swampert did that as well, but did it for 2 energies. You discarded double energy, which sometimes bit you in the butt. The thing about Ceruledge here is that, it's kind of the Pokemon we're just leaving in the active. We are playing double Lucky Ice Pop, double Giant Cape to kind of keep this thing a bit more tanky, as well as Indeedee as well. So that's going to be pretty nice. Comfey to kind of keep you safe from sleeve. We are playing Psychic Energies in this deck. So, I like it. And again, it kind of calls back to the same thing where Psychic type decks really are in an interesting spot. We haven't highlighted Giratina, but you have things like Indeedee, Mimikyu, Giratina, Ceruledge. There's a bunch of really decent Psychic type Pokemon. It's just at the end of the day, like, are any of them better than Altaria? Now the energy discard effect from Ceruledge is pretty niche. Like, pretty often you're just going to discard your own energy, but sometimes you don't, and we are pairing it with Team Rocket Grunt, so it has an additional kind of layer here. I don't think Ceruledge would have been like too good if it just guaranteed to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. In fact, Ceruledge would just be a really relevant card. It would just be a meta card, which, I guess as a promo, they probably didn't want to make that happen. So the RNG aspect of this deck can be a little bit annoying, but it is Ceruledge, and again, like, shout out to Jay Phenomenal, went 5-3 with Ceruledge and Indeedee, lost to Altaria Gourgeist, lost to Miraidon Magnezone, and then did lose to Hydreigon, which you can't fault him for losing to Hydreigon. That's definitely going to be a really tough matchup, but, I don't know if I've ever really highlighted a Ceruledge deck here on the channel. I definitely wanted to highlight it. That's what this video is all about. These sort of midweek off-meta showcase videos, they're just about highlighting the decks that, aren't extremely popular, but really cool, So again, shout out to him. I do like the deck. I do like Ceruledge. It's a fun deck. It's not necessarily it's not a top tier meta strategy, but it's totally fine, Next up, it's going to be Claga, who was playing Mega Koraidon Lucario, 6-3 from the United States at Storm X Umbreon, late night number 5. With a full art Juliana in the prizing, which is cool. Now, this is going to be a Mega Koraidon or a Koraidon EX deck that's a bit unique, so I wanted to highlight it. This is going to be double Onix, double Brock Koraidon with Lucario thrown in, and I actually do like this. Like, I think that the Brock stuff, although it is of course needed for like Steelix, is not a terrible package in general. Like, when you think about all of the ways that we have, and I say all of the ways to generate fighting type energies, Brock is sort of it. It's literally the only thing that we have. And what's funny is that, you can only attach energies to your Onix or Golem with Brock, right? So at first glance, you're like, are we really actually playing Onix just to play the Brock? And like, yeah, like we are. And the funny thing is, it's not even that bad, because Onix here in the active spot is a pretty tanky Pokemon. You're never able to retreat Onix, but that's fine, because Koraidon comes in for free, right? So the Mega Lucario is your backup attacker, but we also have Fighting Coach Lucario to boost the damage with Koraidon. Combine that with Karina in Arena of Antiquity. We got Booster Energy, Ancient Booster Energy Capsule to give Koraidon 190 HP. And then all of a sudden, we basically have like an alternate like Mega Lucario, But what I really like, though, about Koraidon is that theoretically you could just go into a second Koraidon, you know what I mean? And I do find that to be pretty cool. And that's, I think, the big upside to Koraidon is that it's a 2-prize Pokemon and not a Mega Pokemon. Theoretically speaking, you could lead Onix, stack it up, go into Koraidon, right? Get some attacks off, maybe you get KO'd, and then you just go into Mega Lucario. It's really not a bad strategy. Fighting is in a really strange place. I do think there's still just a bit too much Psychic going around for me to feel extremely confident about fighting type decks, but this is one of my favorites that I've seen, and definitely kind of a unique way to play Koraidon EX. I myself like to play Great Tusk. As you guys know, I'm a big Great Tusk enjoyer. Certainly not a bad strategy, but the strategy is similar, right? You just have like a really tanky like single prize Pokemon. You just kind of pile it up with energies. In this case, you're less tanky with Onix, but you're a bit more faster paced with Brock. And then you just go from there. We do a Professor Sada, so you can kind of chain together Koraidons. You can conserve energy a little bit better with Professor Sada, and I do think one Sada is kind of worth it in any Koraidon deck. So I like this. I like this deck. You guys listen. You guys can joke around here. You can say this is a meme, but it's probably one of the better ways to play Koraidon, to be honest. And there's really not that many. So this was a really fun deck. Shout out to Claga here in that Koraidon deck. But speaking of Koraidon here, we've got Deck Skull, which by the way went 6-2-1, made day 2 at PMPT 35 this past weekend. We didn't have a live stream this past weekend, but I would have liked to highlight this deck list from Brazil. Shout out to him. Take a look at this deck, guys. This is going to be Guzzlord Koraidon, which again, in the same vein, right? You typically, when you're playing Koraidon, you need something in the active to kind of buy you time, maybe chip some damage, tank some hits, and then you go into Koraidon, and then you're the first one to attack, and that should give you a distinct advantage. So now we're just using Guzzlord. We're just gonna use Guzzlord. I don't know really why we're playing Celesteela here, because if you do end up leading Koraidon, the only way to get into another Koraidon is to play Koraidon, which doesn't feel great. But what's really funny here is that we are playing Lusamine. So Guzzlord's Grindcore attack does have a colorless energy in its attack cost, right? So theoretically speaking, not only are you kind of splitting up your psychic weakness, and now you're also weak to grass, which, you know, can be an advantage. Guzzlord has 170 HP, it discards energy, does chip damage. It's actually quite decent, you know. Starting Plains, Giant Cape, Rocky Helmet, and Arena of Antiquity. We also have Lusamine and Karina, so a bunch of 1-ofs in the deck, 1 Field Blower, 1 Cyrus, 1 PCL. I really don't hate this. I don't know if you really need double Koraidon, to be fair. Just I don't think you really ever want to lead with it, so maybe just 1 Koraidon is fine. But it's actually really funny. Like, I genuinely like this deck. Yeah, the concept is you just, you know, you get Guzzlord in the active, you grind core a couple times, and then, you know, when you're about to get KO'd, you go into Koraidon, and it's probably not terrible. Again, like there's very limiting ways of which you would want to ever play Koraidon, and I think people are trying to branch out from sort of the Great Tusk stuff. So as we see Onix, Brock, we see Guzzlord here. Maybe something else comes out in the future, you know? Like, there could be, we don't know. Koraidon certainly isn't a weak Pokemon. It's definitely not. It's just sort of an awkward card to play, given the card pool that we have currently available. And it's definitely just different than the other fighting type decks that, as we know, have been pretty relevant ever since Lucario came out. But this is definitely a really unique deck, a really fun deck, and again, straightforward, which I do think Koraidon decks really just sort of benefit from being extremely simple and straightforward, and that's kind of why I like them, honestly. So yeah, there you go. Shout out to Deck School, one of my favorites today. Definitely one of my favorites from this past weekend. And I just did quickly want to highlight Petit Yoda Elite 4 from France. Sorry for the name. 8-2. So I actually had a really great run this weekend playing Decidueye. And I just wanted to highlight this because I don't think a lot of people play Decidueye. I think a lot of people are on Meowscarada, they're on Sceptile. Grass in general has been buffed tremendously ever since Fragrant Forest came out, and I really don't think Decidueye is a bad Pokemon at all. I think we all remember like the turn 2 sniping arrow Decidueye shenanigans that was super annoying because it would just KO your basic on your bench before you could evolve it, and then the concept still applies. I genuinely think Decidueye is still a strong Pokemon. Now, is it better than Meowscarada? Is it better than Sceptile? Like, probably not. Maybe though. Like, I don't know. It's just another option, and I think Grass kind of fits into that same category where Sceptile really felt like, hey, we have a really decent Grass type Pokemon now. But, you know, I think Sceptile came out alongside the Grass type buff of Fragrant Forest, and then after Forest came out, things like Meowscarada and Decidueye also got buffed. So all 3 decks definitely pretty strong. And I just wanted to highlight Decidueye, you know, because it's a good deck and it's fun. 1 Ogerpon in here, 1 Pheromosa. I like the deck. I do. One Quick Growth Extract and then 1 rare, double rare candy, in fact. So really consistent in terms of like making sure we get our evolutions, right? A lot of redundancy there. 1 middle evolution, 1 extract, double rare candy. So no matter what you draw into, you're probably going to find a way to evolve, right? And then shout out to Red Card, you know what I mean? Getting Red Card squeezed in there. So there's Decidueye. Again, a really great run, 8-2. If you take a look at his matches here, lost to Miraidon and Magnezone in the first round, and then went on a crazy win streak here, and then ended up losing to Sleep Altaria, which is tough, even though Ogerpon is in the deck. Yeah, beat a lot of relevant decks in his run. So, and your Grass type, which is going to, again, be a benefit into most of the decks of the metagame, or at least the Dark type decks. You know what I mean? So yeah, really cool. Shout out to Decidueye. We love to see that. And then lastly here, again at PMPT 35, I wanted to highlight this because these are players that didn't make top 8 or anything, but did have great runs. This is going to be PCI Yuan from Germany, 7-2 record, and this is going to be that you know, Giratina Mimikyu Greninja deck. I think we highlighted this maybe a week or 2 ago. You know, I still think Giratina is a strong Pokemon. It's very similar. I mean, this is a very similar deck to that other one that we just took a look at, but instead of like Chingling and instead of, you know, Indeedee thrown in here, like we are just kind of going all in on the Giratina Mimikyu stuff, which again, you know, I really don't think is that bad at all. You know, again, you look at this stuff and you're like, all right, but if we were to just play Altaria Greninja, would it be better? Like, would it be a stronger deck? I really don't know. Altaria Greninja is definitely one of the stronger decks in the game, but there's just so many strong Pokemon, and theoretically, the deck does function mostly the same with the Greninja Cyrus combo, right? It doesn't really matter what you're attacking with. Theoretically, Giratina does the same amount of damage as Altaria. It's just a basic, you know what I mean? There is a world, I think, where Giratina comes back to the very forefront of the metagame. I don't think we're really far away from that. I think you guys would be surprised how easily we could just see a Giratina meta pop right back up. I mean, it's a broken card, does good damage, and I'm actually surprised we don't see more Giratina. Maybe Mega Pokemon do have a bit more reach, so you maybe are eventually going to be reliant on things like, I mean, it's got 150 HP, so it's pretty safe. I mean, this deck doesn't even play Starting Plains or Giant Cape. And again, I don't really think Mimikyu cares at all about the HP amount. So you know what? Shout out to Giratina. I actually think this is just in general a really good deck list. So there you go. That's going to be the last deck that we talk about today. I got to wrap this up because I got to edit this video and try to get it out here in like 30 minutes. So we'll see if we do that. It might be a little bit late today after 4 o'clock, but we're back. I was just really busy the last few days, guys, so I do apologize. But we should be uploading pretty regularly over the next few days, and the live stream should be back this weekend. So again, I do apologize just for the lack of content overall on this channel over the last few days. We are kind of in the mid-season, so there's not a ton going on, but we should be a lot more regular with our uploads moving forward. So I appreciate you guys for sticking around and tuning into the video. It means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers, and again, next week we should be getting even more announcements regarding the next set and the new cards that are coming out, which I'm really excited about. So you guys are definitely going to want to stay tuned for that, and I will certainly cover that to the fullest extent. And yeah, there we go. All right, guys, peace out. Have a good one. Don't forget to register, by the way. Go and register for PMPT number 36. I know the new Pokemon Champions update just came out. I know it's mid-season. I know ranked is out, but definitely go and register. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, guys, peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah.